Hey everyone, welcome to Cyber-Conversations, the show where it's okay to agree to disagree. Today we're continuing our conversation about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. If you haven't already, please click like and subscribe, and as always, I hope you enjoy the show. So,
Yeah,
but
well, I
anyway,
think that I personally believe, and I'm definitely not alone, that George Lucas is absolutely a bona fide modern genius. However, that being said, I think that he really could have used a co-writer especially the dialogue.
yeah,
Like he is really the nerdiest nerd. He is the king of all of us nerds.
yeah,
But he doesn't look like a nerd. He looks like
but he
a
looks like a
creative
Wookiee
genius. He has a
with
creative
his beard.
genius look about him.
Yeah,
He doesn't come across like Peter Jack. You look at Peter Jackson, it's like, oh, I want to play D&D with that guy. He is absolutely the picture of a nerd.
hmm
But Lucas doesn't put that nerd vibe out, but he's clearly a big nerd. He's the guy who builds worlds. He's the guy that imagines spaceships and
yeah.
lasers
He's a visionary,
and
but
wizards and yes,
he's not a great
not the
writer.
guy necessarily to handle dialogue. And so I'm thinking of like Fran Walsh and Boyd.
Philippa Boyle, yeah.
Philippa Boyle, yeah, like how they work together with the Lord of the Rings to create some very memorable, adult, meaningful dialogue and moments. And
Of course.
again, this is a retrospect thing, but I really do feel like Lucas could have used a co-writer, especially when it came to the teenage romance
Oh,
scenes.
and especially this, can you imagine the missed opportunity? He could have worked with Carrie Fisher. That woman was a script doctor. How cool would
Was
that
she?
have been?
Was she
Yeah.
really? I didn't know that.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. She also
Wow.
acted and she
Well,
did,
that would
but
have
she
been
wrote a
great.
lot. How cool would that have been
Oh
for
yeah,
for
to
them
see
to
that in the
say,
credits.
here are the prequels George Lucas gave us, script doctored by Carrie freaking Fisher.
Hell yeah! At some point in the credits, like
Yeah.
written by George Lucas, co-written by Carrie Fisher, or
Yeah.
written by George Lucas and Carrie Fisher, that would have been
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I don't know why I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. I forget.
I'm going to take what you're telling me as gospel truth because I'm not confirming it right now. I hope you're not fibbing to me because
No, no.
I'm accepting it.
I'm trying to. I've told you before. I can't really do a whole lot of searching on the internet while we're talking
No,
because
no,
we'll
but
lose the
you may want to
signal.
put a link. You may put a link out there just so that anybody like me that's curious can actually see it for themselves, straight from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, I'm trying
So
to. Yeah.
let's move on to the assassination attempt with the bugs because that is a super cool scene in my opinion, and the
Yeah.
whole incredible ride through the airwaves of Coruscant. You go through the big building that has the big electric fields, and it's like clearly some kind of power regulator, power plant, or something. You get this Star Wars like flashing glimpse of a million things that make up everyday life on Coruscant, but you only get 1.5 seconds to think about every single one of them, and you're on to the next one. It is that entire scene is an incredibly spectacular ride. I mean,
Yeah.
starting with the droid that's able to use some kind of laser field to open up the shield around Padmé's quarters, and
Yeah.
then the horrific giant poisonous centipedes that get spilled out into her room. All of
Yeah.
that is super cool.
Yeah. Except that they lead to questions for me. Um.
Oh, like what?
Yeah. Oh, real quick, as
You
an
mean like
aside.
Star Wars questions? Like,
Yeah.
ooh, Clone Wars, what's that all about? Oh, I guess
No.
we'll go
No.
on and look at this lightsaber.
No. Things that took me out of the movie. But real
Okay.
quick, just because I'm going to forget if I don't
Mm-hmm.
say it,
Mm-hmm.
Carrie Fisher
Mm-hmm.
had writing credits for Hook. She script doctored Hook and The Wedding Singer
Really?
and Sister Act, the one with Whoopi Goldberg. She
Yep.
has a number of like script doctoring credits, but those are the three that I saw real quick.
That's cool. Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool. And so that would have been, around the same time.
Yeah,
That means she was actually doing script work years before the prequels came out. So
yeah,
it would have absolutely been contemporary for George Lucas to bring her in.
yeah. That
That
would have
is a
been.
missed opportunity. I
Yeah.
have to agree with you on that one, and I did not even know about that.
Yeah. So anyway, what I was going to say, some of the things that pulled me out of that scene, I'm not going to argue. The centipedes were really cool, and it's terrifying because I don't like real life centipedes. So seeing giant centipedes that are definitely poisonous, that would bother me. But first of all, why is Jango Fett, a bounty hunter, hiring a bounty hunter to do his job? And then, why is the bounty hunter that the bounty hunter put a bounty for, like, or gave a bounty to, why is Zam Wesell using these centipedes when she's got a clear shot through the window at the freaking bed with the giant
Wow.
window? Like,
Well,
take
those
a
are some weird
shot.
questions, and I have answers to every one of them.
Take a
That
shot.
those are weird questions, Josh. First of all, the reason why Django is hiring another bounty hunter is because he's under instructions to keep
Camino.
Camino, thank you. To keep the cloning facility completely out of the loop, which means he can be traced back to them possibly, but she can't be traced back to him, and the droid can't be traced back to her. So there's this
The droid did
multiple
get traced
levels
back to
of,
her.
well, but only because of Jedi magic. So, I mean, despite their best attempts, there was still a
It
trail
is.
that led back to Jango Fett, and it was Obi-Wan's genius and Obi-Wan's initiative that made that happen. And we see the heroics take place.
It's
Why were
still.
the centipedes used? Because once the droid backed out and closed the shield, the centipedes could have been blamed for the death of Padme without anybody being the wiser about how they got in.
No, I don't think so. I think that if they really wanted Padme dead, a single shot through the window
Oh,
does it.
oh, oh, and let's approach that. Did you notice how far Obi-Wan had to go to get to Zam Wesell, to get to the rooftop she was on? She
She
was
had,
not in
she,
gun range. She was not in sniper
I don't
range.
know about that. She used a sniper rifle and took out that same robot that
Yeah,
was
well,
carrying.
after he had already been he'd already come like halfway back to her from where Padme was
I don't know.
staying.
I don't
That was
buy
a
it.
long,
Like,
long, long way away.
yeah, but she could. We've seen how many buildings there are in Coruscant. I imagine that there was a building closer that she
Yeah,
could have
but that
gotten on the
means she
roof
would have
of.
had to get even closer. You're ignoring some of the very
Uh,
clear signals of the story. You're ignoring the fact that Camino was so secret they erased it from the Jedi archives. You're ignoring the fact that Jango Fett is the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy, and that he has to protect that Camino secret at all costs. You're ignoring the fact that he picked not just any bounty hunter, but a shapeshifter, and you're ignoring the fact that it was so far away that we got to follow with our camera all the way until she was able to come into range of the droid and then take it out in midair.
but
And there's no way, if she would have got closer, she would have tipped her hand even more. If she would have
she's
put a
a
bullet through the window in Padme, that bullet would have been found and traced back to
not a
her. So it was
bullet, a
like
laser. Use a
a
laser,
blaster.
a blaster.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
you know.
But
But
I
also,
mean, in the
she's a
Star Wars universe,
shapeshifter.
going through the window means logistics and forensics would have been able to tell exactly where the shot came from. It was definitely an assassination. The bugs in her room, if it hadn't been for the Jedi, the bugs in her room would have taken her out, and nobody would have been the wiser. It would have seemed
They
like an
would have.
accident.
No, it wouldn't seem like an accident because they had just blown up her ship. It wasn't exactly subtle. They weren't trying to be subtle. This wasn't the first attempt on her life. They already knew that her life was in danger by someone, presumably a bounty hunter, and she's a shapeshifter. She could have looked like whatever his name is, the guy, the security guy, any of them,
Well,
and
listen,
walked into the
every
room
single
and
thing
shot
that I
her.
just said is perfectly plausible.
Yeah, but
Everything that I just said is one of 10 explanations that are perfectly plausible. So ignore all 10 of them and go, that doesn't make any sense at all. It just brings me out of the movie. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's like you're deliberately looking for something to hate the movie for.
no, I'm not deliberately looking for it. I don't want to do what I call mental gymnastics. I shouldn't have to figure out why she would do it this way. If it was that important, George Lucas should have put it down in the script so that I know, because it was too important for him to leave it out. And I don't want to have to work for it. Especially coming up with my own solutions as to
Mm,
why she would have to
okay.
do this, especially if she's a shapeshifter. I mean, there's more on that later when we get to the bar. She's a shapeshifter. You know what she could have
I
done at the
accept
bar?
that. I don't understand. I accept it. I just don't understand it. Like, yeah, it's not, to me, it's not mental gymnastics. If an assassin shoots somebody, you don't have to be like, wait a minute, why did they do that for? That's so mean. I mean, that
Well,
person now has a bullet in them and they're probably not going to live. Like, why would somebody do that? You assume it's an assassin. You assume somebody paid them. You assume that there's a clandestine operation behind the whole thing. And you sit back and wait to see that whole thing be revealed. And that's exactly what happened. So it's not mental gymnastics to think a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes.
no, no, that part is easy to understand, but why she would pick a building that's too far to shoot through, use a convoluted scheme using a robot that can cut through glass or whatever it was, and centipedes, when she could have used a sniper rifle, shot Padme, Padme's dead, and then make yourself look like someone else and walk away. Like she's a shapeshifter. I mean, we have
Well,
to talk about
here's
the
a. I
we
told
have
you
to.
there's 10. I told you there's 10 explanations. Here's explanation number two. Um, Django heard that she was a really good shapeshifter. He found out she was a really good assassin. He found out she was a shapeshifter. He decided that she was the best pick, maybe because she happened to be in the area, and he made a bad call because she failed clearly. Even though it was some pretty amazing heroics on the part of a Jedi that caused her to fail, the
Yeah,
fact is she did fail, and I'm sure that's not what Django wanted. So here's
of
explanation
course.
number two. He picked the wrong person, and she made the wrong choice, and that's why she failed. And thank goodness, because we don't want Padme to die. So that worked out for the story.
Yeah, but
There's
again,
explanation number two.
yeah, but we've talked about this before. One thing I don't like about villains is when they're made cartoonishly stupid. That was my big problem with Otis in Superman the movie, was that he detracted from Lex Luthor because Lex Luthor is this mastermind genius criminal who is so intelligent that he gives Superman a run for his money, but he surrounds himself with someone like Otis. It's like Pinky and the Brain. How many times would Brain have been successful if it wasn't for Pinky? How
Well,
many
that's why we
times?
have the comedy character with the villain. It makes the villain not so scary.
Yeah, but it's Star Wars. Like, if you
Now
want to
in
make him
Star Wars,
formidable,
that doesn't fit.
yeah,
Yeah,
if you want to make him formidable, you don't put Otis in it. You don't put Gilligan. How many times would they have gotten rescued from Gilligan's Island if it wasn't for Gilligan himself? The second time he
yeah,
ruined my escape attempt, I would have drowned the freaking jerk.
yeah. They should have killed Gilligan.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. What was the line? It's amazing that tiny brain generates enough power to keep
Yeah.
those legs moving
Yeah.
forward. Something like that.
Yeah, that was almost exactly the line. I
Lex
love
Luthor.
that line, Lex Luthor. And rest in peace, Gene Hackman. He just died,
Yeah,
what,
yeah,
like
that was
a week
sad.
ago at
Yeah.
the time of this recording?
Yeah. I don't know how much you discovered about that, but I found out that he actually had Alzheimer's and he
Yeah,
had been in the house for a week after his
after his
wife
wife
passed
died.
away.
Yeah, and that really
And
sucked.
then he croaked. Like,
Yeah,
wow, that is super sad.
yeah, it
And
really
honestly,
sucked.
Going back to Romeo and Juliet, not to make light of the situation, of course,
Hmm.
but that's kind of romantic that that his brain was already gone, and
Yeah,
they had lived a very long, full life together, and the time was up, and it's never pretty. It's never pretty. Let's not make any
yeah,
illusion that when our time is up that it's pretty. So it is an ugly end, but you know what? They ended together, and I think that there's a lot of long-term romantic couples out there that couldn't imagine checking out any better way than that.
yeah.
Checking out together.
Well, Johnny Cash had it better. His wife died, and he lasted about 6 months. He was in full control. He had to live with the knowledge
Yeah,
that
no,
she
it
had
gets
passed.
really ugly with Alzheimer's. Like that to
Yeah,
me, that's
it
what grosses
really,
me out.
that's the
Is
worst.
that Lex Luthor had to like wander around the house in his underwear for a week
Yeah,
with Alzheimer's barely processing the fact, maybe even totally aware of the fact that his wife had passed away, but absolutely have no idea what to do about it.
Yeah.
That's just
Even
gut
their dog,
wrenching.
one of
Anyway,
their dogs.
we're
Yeah,
off.
we are way off
Yeah, even
topic,
the
but
somehow the dog died. Anyway, yeah, we talked about Gene Hackman, but yeah, it's a sad
but the
thing, you know.
point is that Zam Wesell may have been a really poor bounty hunter, but it's still like this is Star Wars. I don't want a cartoon bad guy, so it
She
bothers me.
seemed like a very good bounty hunter to me. I mean, she was a badass. It's
Yeah,
just I think that we pitted a badass against the Jedi, and I think right there off the bat, right at the beginning of the movie, we get to see just how badass these Jedi are. Like Obi-Wan, this is Obi-Wan. This isn't a random Jedi.
yeah.
This is somebody that we already want to see be a badass because we know how he ends up.
I
And
don't want
so
to.
to I mean this whole scene in the beginning really does solidify him as wow, this
I
is a
don't.
superhero.
I don't want to sound like I'm like I have no care at all about the fact that, like I've said before, Obi-Wan is my favorite character, and part of it is due to
Yeah.
how he takes down Zam Wesell. It's the problem is that I think Zam did a lot of stupid things that I don't understand why she did. And one of them
I'm
was
I'm
why
just
she
going to
would
have to
use.
disagree.
But there, even when we get to the bar, and I know we have to talk about the chase to the bar, but when we get to the bar,
Ooh, the knees, man. Oh my God, the knees. That makes me hurt every single time I see it. Anakin is on top of the ship, and he actually like lets go of the ship just before it impacts, and
mhm,
he falls and lands directly on his. He falls 30 feet and lands directly on his knees. Now he rolls to a stop, but good Lord, the
yeah,
impact on those knees makes me cringe every time I see it.
yeah. But then when they get to the bar, what does the shapeshifter do? Attacks one of the Jedi instead of shifting her shape to look like someone else and walking away. They would have spent hours in that bar searching for her, and she would have been long gone. But instead, she chose to attack Obi-Wan
Maybe.
so that we could get a callback to Episode 4 with him cutting off her arm because that's what Obi-Wan does.
Yeah,
It's
maybe. I don't
it's
know. Like I feel like she knew the jig was up because the Jedi have, preternatural senses, and I feel like she attacked because she thought that was the best chance she had of getting away because there was no way she was going to fool these guys.
then I think that she would have kept track of where Anakin was, but he snuck up behind her because she was so focused on Obi-Wan. Like no matter what, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
it's
I think she was just busted. She was just busted either way, And so I think she was by the time they chased her into that bar, she was just acting out of desperation,
I
and
don't know.
that just may be the fact that she wasn't as great of a bounty hunter as Django thought she was.
Maybe. But like that's what I have to go by is that she wasn't that great a bounty hunter because there are no other explanations for the points that I've said. That was my argument. That's like what you wanted to know. Yeah, it
Yeah.
it
Okay.
did bother me, but I do like what they did do because they were exciting scenes. It's just
It's
that,
interesting. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that you tear those scenes apart so much because I started out by saying, "Man, we start out with this spectacular chase scene and all this
well,
cool stuff about Coruscant."
well, see, because here's the thing I do want people to understand this. I don't hate this movie, and I'm tearing it apart because there are things that bother me about it, but I also look at what we did get, and even though I don't really like the way we got it, I still appreciate what we did get for what's in it.
I can respect that.
If Zam
I mean,
Wesell
we
had
are
been,
here to talk about it, so you might as well be honest about it, for
yeah,
better and for worse.
if Zam had been better at her job and had just shot Padme, we would have lost Padme. However, we would have also lost a really cool shot of Obi-Wan jumping through the window and and grabbing onto the robot and clinging on.
Hell
We would have
yeah.
had
Hell yeah.
we would
That
have lost
wild,
that.
reckless, heroic nature really earned me a lot of respect for Obi-Wan.
Although I will say this,
I can appreciate that.
although I will also say it's another missed opportunity. I think that that was a role reversal.
That should have
Obi-Wan,
been Anakin.
it should have been Anakin. Obi-Wan was very much like, we're going to protect her. We're not trying to start an investigation. And Anakin was the one who was like, I'm going to find out who did this. So when Anakin killed the centipedes and then saw the robot flying away, it really should have been Anakin that jumped through the windshield or the window to find out who killed who was trying to kill
I'd be
Padme,
I'd
and
be
Obi-Wan
willing
should
to.
have been like, "Oh God, that guy, he's going on, he's reckless again. All right, I got to go save
Yeah,
his ass."
I got to agree with you. I think jumping out that window is so reckless and honestly so powerful and confident that it was stupid, and that would have been a little bit better suited to Anakin. I would be willing to bet that Lucas wrote it that way in the beginning, but then once we lose one of them, we have the other one catch up, and the only way to catch up is in a vehicle, which is also going to be the plot device for saving them, from the perilous condition that they're in. And so, I bet when he wrote Obi-Wan behind the wheel of the speeder, he then realized that the first, 1/5 of the scene was actually about crashing through the window and grabbing onto the droid, and the other 4/5 was about the hotshot piloting. And so I don't know, but I'd be willing to bet that he originally wrote it reversed and then turned it around only because he wanted that last 4/5 of the chase scene to be Anakin showing off his prowess behind the wheel.
Maybe I just
Maybe.
I don't know,
Because I agree with you. I agree with you. It
yeah,
is a missed opportunity. That reckless, heroic, desperate. Hey, my girlfriend. That moment really should have been Anakin's.
yeah.
But then you got Obi-Wan behind the wheel, showing off his prowess, and we already knew that. Based on Obi-Wan's own confession, that Anakin was the best star pilot in the galaxy,
Yeah,
and we
but I
haven't
mean,
really seen him behind the wheel except in a pod race.
but we really do get Obi-Wan piloting that star speeder or that I don't know what they call it,
It was
car.
some kind of speeder. Yeah.
Yeah, he was piloting it because Anakin jumped out.
Yeah,
Again, another
you're right.
reckless
You're
move.
right. All they just sort of traded the wheels, so
Yeah,
they could have done that the other way. They could have done like
exactly.
Anakin could have jumped out the window. Obi-Wan could have caught up with him, and then they could have traded.
Yeah, instead
Yeah,
of
yeah,
having them trade, Anakin would have been picked up by Obi-Wan, and then he
yeah.
would have jumped out again. He would have been like,
To be
"Go
honest,
that way, go
until
that way," and Anakin and Obi-Wan would be
until
like,
this
"You."
conversation, I've never even thought about it, and I guess I would chalk that up to the same thing I said before. Like, yeah, now that you got me talking about it, I would tend to agree that it probably should have been Anakin that crashed through that window. But this parallel universe that we're in, it was Obi-Wan that jumped out. And
Yeah.
so I'm just going to leave it at that. In a parallel universe, there is a version of Star Wars where Anakin jumped out the window first, but it's like, I mean,
Well, maybe, but the point of
what are
the
we talking
show,
about in that universe?
but the show does its job. The whole point of this is that we talk about it, we discuss it. There's nothing, there's no winning or losing, and I'm not trying to convince you to not like the movie, but I'm explaining to you some of the things that I didn't like. This happens to be something that you think about it and you're like, yeah, you're right. That doesn't mean you
Yep,
have to change your opinion, but
yep,
it's
yep.
diversity. I
Yeah,
have a different way of
and
thinking than you do, and
I'd like to use this opportunity to reiterate the fact that even though on some areas I disagree with you, my brain is malleable enough to see your point. I'm not adamantly trying to defend the prequels because I already know you're going to adamantly try to attack them. I don't think either one of us are really adamant. We have
well, I
our
don't,
bendings,
yeah.
and that's it.
But I also don't want people to think that I'm like I chose to be on the side of against the prequels because we needed an other. Like it's not
No,
that. These are my true
no.
feelings.
Yep.
And again, I don't hate the prequels, but I don't like them as much as I like the original series, and I don't like them as much as I like the sequels.
Josh and I have known each other for the better part of 30 years. I've never
Yeah.
had a podcast. He's never had a podcast. I can honestly tell you that we have not staged any of these conversations. He is expressing exactly what he feels, and I'm expressing exactly what I feel without any scripting at the spur of the moment.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, like at various times over the years, why we liked or didn't like something. But it was just a couple months ago. I was thinking we need to do a podcast, but that's because
Oh,
of,
yeah.
what I've been seeing on Facebook and other social media, and even in real life to a degree, where people, it's not enough that they disagree. They got to take down everyone a peg, and I'm against that. Stop it. Just get
We
along.
both are.
Yeah,
Yeah, we both are.
yeah. Like it's okay that you
I'm
like.
not even sure it's about saving society or saving humanity or saving America. It's more like saving the Star Wars fandom.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's all of it. I think that not allowing someone to have their opinion, that's about as un-American as it gets.
Oh boy, am I going to agree with that. Yep.
That's
Absolutely.
it's okay to have a different point of view. That's how our country was founded. Not that I'm against anyone from another country listening to this show, by all means. And there are lots of countries that are free and have lots of, freedoms, so I'm not going to say that America is, cornered the market on freedom or anything like that. It's just, this is a big part of it is people that I've been seeing have been not just disagreeing, they have to like fight over it. And that's something that
Yeah,
bothers me.
yeah, I've seen it too.
Yeah.
And also, I think that having somebody to disagree with you in the room is another good reason why you should have a co-writer.
Yeah. Well,
How's that for a
yeah.
segue?
Yeah. So what, well, anyway, we talked a little bit about the speeder chase and we talked about the bar. So then we get, we kind of calm down a bit from the action so that we can start doing the search. We've
Yep,
got,
and I'll just say in conclusion that the look at the underworld of, well, not the underworld but the lower levels of Coruscant, we've actually hit the ground by the time we get to the bar. We get to go into a bar. There's a cool bunch of like sports. It kind of feels a little earthy because everybody's sitting around drinking,
yeah.
except it's also a little sci-fi, a little Star Wars. Definitely not the Mos Eisley Cantina. But
Hmm.
then there's one shot. One of the games on the wall looks exactly like Cyberball. If anybody remembers the game from the 90s, it was on the Genesis and I think the Super Nintendo and probably PC too. But it was like playing football with robots. And there's literally a three-dimensional rendition of it on one of the screens. It's just it's so dense. Like Star Wars is, that's my favorite thing about it. It's
Every
so
time,
dense.
every time they go into the bar, I notice that one of the screens is showing a pod race, and
Yeah, pod races are on the screen.
I always think that's funny because that was a little way George Lucas trolled everyone because he said he promised everyone during the making of that pod racing was going to be in episode two, and that was
Oh,
it. And then he said there was pod racing.
okay.
People were like,
All
"There's no
right,
pod
George.
race in episode two," and he was like, "Yeah, if you look on the screen, there's a pod race going on. I kept my word."
I
And
really
then,
love the introduction of like the death sticks, which we've never heard of before, but we kind of
mhm,
get the idea that there's some kind of cigarette. And George is actually putting his little left-handed programming in by saying, yeah, if cigarettes are death sticks in the
mhm,
Star Wars universe, we're just honest and call them what they are. That's a
yeah,
very anti-smoking stance.
mhm,
Yeah, but anyway, there's just tons of like just the whole chase, even the introduction of Zam's race. Like we haven't seen a shapeshifter in the Star Wars universe, so like
mhm,
there's just tons of little things that are sort of poured into the Star Wars galaxy through this scene. But when they go into the bar, there's like a really rapid holographic ad playing on the wall, and
yep,
it's like you could see the races that are sliding by. They're saying something and they're giving like a thumbs up, but they're all familiar Star Warsy races.
mhm,
So you get this very alien neon sci-fi universe, and yet somehow every single piece of it feels familiar. It feels like home. And it
yeah,
and it and at the time, now we look back in retrospect, we go, oh, that's all Star Wars. But at the time, it was all being fed to us fresh. All we had was the first trilogy, and so well, and Phantom Menace at that point. So
yeah,
so it's just
and this
before we
was yeah.
leave that, I just wanted to state how dense all that was.
Yeah, well, and I did say this before in our talk about episode one, but Coruscant for a long time was something that I was looking forward to seeing because I always loved the idea that there's a planet that's just covered by a massive city, that almost nothing of the actual planet is left, and that the city is buildings that are thousands of stories high, and no one ever goes below the thousandth floor. And seeing it in the Phantom Menace was great, but we didn't really see much of it. So this was the first time that we really got to see a good look at Coruscant, and I enjoyed that. But
Yeah.
then we get
There's so much more of Coruscant I want to see. The Clone Wars sort of scratched that itch a little bit, but
yeah.
there, like honestly, what would it kill us to get a whole series just on Coruscant? There is a
Well,
huge world there to explore.
I think I mentioned this before, but one thing, and I'm not going to harp on Disney because I'm actually appreciative of what Disney does. But one thing they did that I am against when they bought the Star Wars rights, when they bought LucasArts, they canned several games that were in development, video games, and one of them, I believe, was called Star Wars 1313, and it was supposed to be, supposedly, it was a story set in Coruscant where you would be. a non-Jedi, I assume a bounty hunter, but I'm not sure. And you had to go down into these lower levels being the thousandth, maybe the 13th, the 1,313th floor. I don't know. Um, but in any case, it got canceled. So
Oh, well, it's weird how Disney picks the ones that it wants to do versus the ones it doesn't want to do. We were just talking about me and my son were just talking about another series that needs to be made. It was like
I'm not sure, but I think
you and
all
I
the.
were just talking about the Obi-Wan and Anakin pass. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, I would
that would
love to
make a
see that.
really that'd make a really cool series of like 10 episode shorts
Like the Young
on
Indiana Jones
Disney
Chronicles.
Plus. Yeah, exactly.
The
Just
Young Indiana Jones
little
Chronicles. It
micro
would be the young
adventures.
Anakin Skywalker
Seriously.
adventures. Yeah, and it would.
Even in the Genndy Tartakovsky animation styles, do it cheap. We want to see the events unfold, and especially we want to see one of them fall into a nest of Gundark, so that conversation has a little more credibility.
Yeah, and we can see if Gundarks do indeed look like the ones from the Coneheads.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you had asked if Gundarks are part of the Star Wars, or if Coneheads were part of the Star Wars universe, and I said I don't see why not. ET is, because we saw ET on
Yeah.
in the Senate. So
Yeah. Well, Marvel's got us all ruined, man. We are all convinced that all universes, every imagination is all simultaneously existing together, like in Fantasia on the Neverending Story. So yeah, and the Star Wars galaxy is first of all vast and
mhm.
highly populated and highly diverse, and second of all, let's face it, even after all these TV series and all these movies, it's largely unexplored.
Yeah,
And so, sure, yeah, we'll put the Predators in there too while we're at it. How about that?
and the aliens.
Why not?
Yeah. Anyway, so then we get the basically the investigation by Obi-Wan, and that there's not a whole lot to say. Although I do like the design, the character design of the diner and
Dax.
the
Yeah.
Dax, yeah, Dax. What's his name? Dax. Jet
Pretty sure it was
Dexter, right?
Dax.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and the robot, the droid, the waitress.
Yeah, the unicycle robot was really
Yeah,
cool. You know
yeah.
what's funny is that in 2001 or whenever the movie came out, the idea of a robot flowing around on one wheel seemed kind of janky. It was like, well, that's CG because that couldn't possibly be. And yet here we are 25 years later, and we literally can make a robot that balances on one wheel.
Yeah.
So yeah,
If there was anything that was going to bother me, it would just be that he had to give the waitress droid the most stereotypical, waitress from New Jersey voice,
yeah, it's
like,
Flo. It's literally
yeah,
Flo. It's a pink droid with like, I mean, did she, I got to remember, did she actually have like a pocket on her breast where she could keep like
I don't think
order
so.
slips or
I
something?
mean, I think she was painted like, I think there was like a pocket area that was painted on her. I don't remember
That's what
exactly.
I mean. I
But
think
yeah, she's
that's what I
like,
mean.
she might as well just, she, like George Lucas was like, I got to make her as stereotypical as possible. Every waitress is like this. I'm going to make her like this. It's so, but whatever. It's
Well,
not a
I think,
complaint.
well,
It's just,
I think it's a good juncture to be able to say that in all things Star Wars, we nerdy Star Wars types, we love the weirdness and the imagination and the art and the creativity, and yet I think that Lucas is a pretty grounded guy. I think that's why he was able to get the whole thing off the ground because he understood business, he understood how to schmooze and do the politics and everything. He's a grounded guy, not a head in the clouds kind of nerd. And I think that every single thing that he tried to do with the Star Wars universe was whacked out and crazy and, aliens and lasers and wizards. But he always tries to inject as much humanity and familiarity as possible into every scene. And I think that's what we see here. That's why all the races have an Indian accent or a Russian accent
yeah,
or a
yeah.
Japanese accent.
And I know.
There's a lot of familiarity in a universe as crazy and whacked out as the Star Wars galaxy,
I
and I
know,
think that's on purpose.
and it's obvious that George Lucas was just it's shorthand for waitress. If you have her talk like Flo, then everyone
Right,
immediately knows
right,
it's a waitress. And
exactly.
he didn't
That's
want to
not a
spend a
battle
whole lot of
droid.
yeah.
It's
So
not a battle droid that just happens to be in there getting a bowl of nuts and bolts or something.
yeah, yeah. But in any case, weird, but I'm not complaining about it or anything. I thought it was funny. But then,
I'm looking at a picture of her right now, and she has a thing on her chest that looks like it's like a designation of. Okay. So she's got like a little LED display on her chest, and it's right where her name tag should be. And
yeah,
then underneath it, there's a slit in the metal, and I'm sure nothing could fit in there, but it looks exactly like the kind
like
of
a
thing a
pocket.
waitress would like.
Yeah,
Yeah, put her little order, her little what
yeah,
do you call it? I've never been a waitress before. The things that you write down people's orders on.
yeah. Well, yeah. Um, so then we got that, and then we have another scene that bugs me a little bit. Is when they're getting ready to go to when Anakin and
Oh, we're
Padme.
skipping over the razor dart. I
Well,
mean,
okay, we can
he
talk
that's
about
where he
that. I mean, there's
uncovers the mystery.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, there's not.
What about?
Go
Wait a minute,
ahead.
you're not going to complain about the fact that Dex is obviously an old friend of Obi-Wan's, and yet we don't get to see a backstory. I mean, this is a
Well,
really good place to cut scene and then cut away for 45 minutes so we can like see this whole story of how Dex
no, see,
and
it's
Obi-Wan
not
came
about
together.
that. No, see, the
Ah,
difference
okay.
is this is a movie about Anakin and Obi-Wan, so I wouldn't mind
Okay.
seeing how they became friends. This is not a
I'm
movie
teasing you.
about, yeah,
I'm not being unfair. I'm
yeah, yeah.
teasing you. It's just it's like it's again. We're gonna go through every single Star Wars movie, and we're gonna stop every 3 minutes and go, whoa, 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 wait a minute. What was that all about? I want the backstory to that because
Well,
that's what
no.
makes Star Wars great.
Well, yeah, but I wouldn't mind, not for nothing, I wouldn't mind seeing a story about Dex because I don't know anything about him. And I want to know how he knew
That's another
about,
thing that's never been explored, huh?
yeah, I want to know how he knew about Camino when even the Jedi didn't. No one had, like, no
Right.
one remembered it.
Well, I
Um,
get the impression from Dex, and again, this is mental gymnastics. I get the impression from Dex that he, once upon a time, was a much bigger badass than the chef that we meet.
yeah.
That he had sort of like maybe he just had enough, maybe he'd lost enough, maybe he was even under protection, and so he was given a business in, let's face it, a relatively nice neighborhood. He's got this very 50s style trailer diner in a
Mhm.
relatively nice neighborhood of Coruscant. So I do get the impression that Dex is like undercover and that he used to be somebody really important, but now he's just wants to be away from war.
Yeah, and
Oh,
this,
and by the way, there is no way I want that giant sausage fingered lizard making my food. With his filthy wife beater shirt.
yeah.
I do not want that guy cooking my lunch for me. I'm sorry.
I have so many things I could say to that, but they are completely off topic, so I'm not going to say anything.
Okay,
But
moving on.
Um, so then I was going to bring up the scene where Anakin and Padme are getting ready to fly back to
Yeah.
Naboo,
Okay, the first romantic moment
but
together,
I wasn't
really.
sure if there was something you wanted to bring about, if you wanted to talk about something before that, like,
Well, I want to mention that the ship they get on looks just like a Twinkie, which is exactly what the ship
yeah,
that Palpatine lands on Naboo at the end of the first movie was.
yeah,
That we call them the Twinkie ships. For some reason, Twinkie ships are like standard classical transports in the Star Wars universe.
yeah.
I don't even know what those are called. I don't know who builds them. I don't know why they all look like Twinkies, but that's just a thing.
I will say I did enjoy the scene. This is before we get to the scene with Anakin and Padme. I did enjoy the scene with the younglings and Yoda teaching them. I mean,
Oh
it kind
yeah.
of takes out a little bit of the whole idea that Yoda trained Obi-Wan. It sounded special when he said it in the original trilogy, like Obi-Wan was trained by the master himself, and now we find out Yoda trained all of the younglings when they were younglings. But that's not really taking anything away. I did enjoy the scene. Um, I
It was
liked how they
adorable,
did
you
it.
know. I
The only
Yeah.
complaint I would say is that these Jedi monks are uh, like so wise, but they've got these kids with blinders on and lightsabers standing 2 feet apart, and they're swinging them around. Like, you don't think there's a chance that a kid's gonna have an accident?
Well, they're swinging them around in a very limited, controlled manner. The arcs
Yeah,
that they
but
were using seemed to be something that they had done a million times
I
before.
think that
I mean, in this case, Josh, I'm going to strongly urge the both of us to defer to Master Yoda's judgment. Master Yoda knows what he's doing when it comes to
yeah,
younglings. So even though I would look at that and cringe along with you, I think Yoda knows what he's doing.
I think Yoda knows what he's doing, but Yoda is also the same one who said wars do not make one great. So maybe don't teach them lightsabers. It could have been just as cool seeing them learning meditation or learning to push things with the
Whoa,
Force or
wait a minute. You're not going on a limb and assuming that wielding a lightsaber means starting a war.
no, no, but
A
I'm just
lightsaber is
saying
never to be used for aggression.
no, but still, like there are so many things that they could have. Since Yoda was the one who was kind of, he had always been against the idea of combat, or at least that was the impression I got of him, that he didn't really believe in fighting unless it was a last. He was like Miyagi. Fighting is a last resort, which is how that was the impression of the Jedi I had in the original series. It just, they could have done anything other than lightsabers with the kids, and it would have been just as cool. Seeing them standing on their heads, levitating things would have been cool. Seeing them sitting
Yeah, you're
cross-legged
right.
and meditating would have been cool.
Yeah, you're
Anything.
right. I think that in this case it's and I'm not making an excuse. I'm just making an explanation. I
Yeah,
think in this case, like the scene really wasn't about the training, but it was something going on in the background. And it's just like the waitress. I think Lucas just wanted like the most instant, iconic way to go. Oh, those are little Jedi's,
yeah, I'm
and so
sure.
you put lightsabers. But I agree with you. I think having them all stand on their heads and like lifting like rocks in the air would have been an even cooler homage. And like the idea of Yoda training kids for war, that never even occurred to me because to me, I understand the Sith abuse everything, but to me, the lightsaber is a defensive tool, and when it comes out, it only comes out long enough to end the violence and restore the peace, and then it goes right back.
Yeah,
And it's always hidden. It's never
that's
it's never dangling on the outside.
not to say that I don't think that young Jedi should learn how to use the lightsaber, because obviously they should. But I don't imagine that
Obviously,
Yoda would be the one to teach it. I would think that their own masters would teach them when they're old enough. Just I don't know. Again, this is not
maybe,
a complaint.
maybe,
It's just an
yeah.
observation.
Another parallel dimension thing.
Yeah.
But
But then we
but
get
it
to
is a
the
really
scene
cool
that.
scene because Yoda is the diminutive hero,
Mhm.
and to see him with a bunch of children that are his size, and then to I mean the whole thing when like he's making fun of Obi-Wan and the kids are giggling about it. That's adorable. And
Yeah.
then Obi-Wan's got a serious problem that he doesn't have any idea about. Yoda presumably has an inkling of what's going on, but he asks the kids, and one
Mhm.
of them actually speak. Isn't that Lucas's son? That one that speaks up, isn't that Lucas's son?
No, no.
He
Lucas's
has two
son.
sons in the movie. He has two sons
Oh,
in the movie.
well,
I
I
think
know
that
that
may have
one
been
of
one of
his
them.
sons was the one who gets killed in Revenge of the
Yeah,
Sith.
but I think the one that speaks is the other one. I could
Oh,
be
okay.
mistaken. You can maybe look that up. But anyway,
Yeah.
when he says, somebody erased it from the archives, well, that's something that Obi-Wan didn't even consider as a possibility because he thinks it's
He thinks
quote
it's
unquote
impossible.
impossible.
Yeah.
And then Yoda giggles about that because it's like, the mind of a
Truly,
child
yeah.
has no barriers, it has no preconceptions, it has no
Yep.
baggage. And that
Yeah.
is such a wise moment from Yoda. I love that.
I always love Yoda's wise moments, and that was one of them. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But then
Do
we
you
get
remember
to.
the first episode of the Clone Wars when Yoda is in the cave with the clones and he gives them the pep talk?
It's been a while
The
since
very
I saw
first
that first
episode of
one,
the yeah,
because the first
that
episode
hooked me.
wasn't great. Like I liked
Well,
it, but
but
I didn't
that
love it.
one scene was enough to hook me.
Yeah.
That one scene where Yoda is in there and like you hear the Yoda theme start playing and he starts walking from clone to clone and giving them the Luke Skywalker treatment.
Hmm.
And it's just so familiar. It's really truly who Yoda is.
Yeah.
That's what I love about Yoda is not his badassery because at the
Right.
end of this movie he actually breaks out and shows us what he can do with a lightsaber.
Yeah.
But it's just the peaceful, the wisdom, the
Yeah.
the the command. I love his whole thing of the my ally is the force and a
Yeah.
powerful ally it is. It's like
Yeah. I love that.
I'm not anything, but this supernatural force that I wield is everything.
Yoda is
And so
one of
fear
my
that,
favorite.
don't fear me.
Yeah, Yoda is
Yeah.
one of my favorite characters. He doesn't take the place of Obi-Wan, who is my absolute favorite. Yoda
Well,
is in my top five, though. He's not my
Obi-Wan
top three,
is
but
is more relatable because
yeah,
he's human.
yeah.
So I
But
get that.
Yoda is in my top five of best my favorite Star Wars characters. He's probably number 4 or 5. Probably number
Yeah,
5.
definitely mine as well. Yeah, mine as well.
But then we get to a scene that does bother me, and that's Anakin and Padme packing, getting ready to go to Naboo because she's gonna hide out from this bounty hunter that's still looking for her, as far as they know. We know he's not, but they don't know that. So one of the things that bothers me about this scene, first of all, Anakin really likes this girl, and what he does is as creepy as possible. Let's not do this if you want to get a girl's infections, treating her really creepy. But on top of that, they're standing in the same bedroom where a assassination attempt was made on her life the night before, in front of the same window during the middle of the day with the shades open. There are even robots right outside the window looking in, the same way the robot that tried to assassinate her was looking in. Like Helen Keller could shoot her at this point. I mean, does no one know about like hide? There's someone out there trying to kill you. Let's not stand out in the middle of the same room in the middle of the daylight.
What scene are we talking about? Give me a line of dialogue.
It's when Anakin and Padme are there. She's packing. She's in her bedroom,
Oh yeah, okay, I remember. Yes, you're
and
right.
she's packing, and he's like complaining about
Yeah.
Obi-Wan.
Yeah,
He's
that's why
supposedly
sometimes
protecting her.
masters ride us.
Yeah,
Yeah, sometimes masters are mean to us because they make us grow. Yeah, I remember that.
and he's
Now,
supposedly
what's
protecting
creepy?
her,
What
but
does he do that's creepy?
he's like, she says, "Don't stare at me that way." He's like what? And he's like, makes me feel uncomfortable. And he's like, whatever you say. And he looks at her even more creepy. At the very end of that scene, he's like
Oh,
staring at her.
yeah,
Even
I
I
didn't know what
felt
you were
un.
talking about because I've never felt that scene was creepy. I felt it was
I,
a little more creepy what he said on the pickle ship.
I thought that was creepy, and the way he looks at her is even more like it almost made me uncomfortable.
Oh,
But my biggest complaint about that scene is that she's out in the open in the middle of daylight in front of the same window where an assassination attempt was made on her life when she knows there's an assassin after her and doesn't know the assassin has left. At this point, anyone could have shot her.
everybody knows assassins don't kill you during the daytime, Josh. Come on.
It was ridiculous and it bothered me. Even watching the movie, I was like, oh
There's
my
nothing
God.
about that scene that ever bothered me. In fact, it was so insignificant. I had to get clarity on to remember what scene you were talking
I
about.
remember.
I did not see any of that in all the times that I've seen the Clone Wars. I've never seen any of that that you just
I
described.
remember
I mean, I saw
watching
the
that movie.
scene.
Yeah, I remember watching the movie with my, at the time, wife. I was still married. That's how, I mean, it was 2002. And we were watching it, and I was like, what the hell? And I looked at her and I was like, is that the same window where they just tried to assassinate her? And she laughed, and she hates
Well, I
Star
think the
Wars.
droids are outside the window because they're repairing the window, and it
Yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
smashed because of
yeah.
the assassin. It was
No, it was.
smashed because of Obi-Wan.
No, I know, and yeah, they were obviously trying to repair the window. But the fact of the matter is that a droid came up to that very window and tried to assassinate her. And now it's the middle of the day. The blinds aren't even down, and she's standing there, just like with a sign that says "Shoot me."
Well, okay, but there's, I mean, I'm just thinking about this live right now because I've never even thought that that scene was something that should bother me. But the first thing that comes to mind is there was an assassin, the Jedi tracked her, and she died in their arms.
But they knew
Therefore,
that there was someone else.
assassin, yeah, but she didn't know that. Nobody else
Oh,
knew that,
I'm
possibly.
sure that the Jedi, she's going into hiding. Therefore, I'm sure the Jedi told her there was someone who shot Zam and
But
got
the
away.
immediate threat is gone. The immediate threat has literally
They don't
been
know that he's
killed.
gone. No,
No,
because
the immediate threat, the one that launched the attack last night, was killed last night in front of the bar. And we know that for sure because we watched it happen right in front of our eyes.
yeah, but the Jedi saw someone who was fairly good aim, shot
Yes.
that same assassin with that dart,
And so we go back to having this shadow menace in the background that Padme's been living under for presumably months or years, and she can't just live in an iron box her whole life. She's a
Yeah,
bold,
but
she's
that's
a bold leader type, and she's just like, yeah, somebody's trying to kill me, but I'm going to go on with my life.
she's not going to go on with her life in front of a balcony, especially in the middle of the day when anyone could have shot her. Like that's not hiding. And then she
Yeah,
goes to
I
Naboo,
see your point. I see your point. It just has never bothered me at all. I see your point.
but then
I
they
think
also
they could have
choose.
had that. They could have had that same scene in a more isolated environment where it doesn't have to happen in the exact same room where the
Yeah,
attempt took place.
yeah. But then,
Yeah.
but even the logic of going back to Naboo kind of escapes me. Like, she's going into hiding by going home, and
Well, they'd
then
never expect it to find her on Naboo. I mean, what? That's a remote location. Why would she ever be there?
because it's her home, it's where she
I'm
lives. That's the first
I'm being
place I would look.
facetious.
And on top of that, look how good a job she does hiding there. She's on the balcony there all the time too. Like,
There's if you were a good bounty hunter, you could actually have hid in the bushes across the lake and had a perfect beat
yeah,
on her standing there at the balcony,
like
making
I
goo goo
said,
eyes at her Jedi protector.
like I said before, Helen Keller could have assassinated her at this point. You don't even need eyes and ears. I'm not saying anything disparaging about Helen Keller. It's just as an assassin,
Well,
usually
I
eyes and
for
ears are
one
very helpful, but anyone could have shot Padme at this point. Like she's
I,
completely
for
out in
one,
the
am
open.
glad that they didn't because Padme needed to get knocked up so we could have Luke and Leia. I
Yeah,
don't
I
think the Star Wars
agree.
universe would have been the same without Luke and Leia. So
I'm not saying
I'm gonna go ahead and go with the story and say it's a good thing that Padme didn't get blown away, regardless of how careless she was and how incompetent the assassination team in charge of her assassination was.
no, I'm not saying she should have died. I'm saying that it feels like we're getting these cartoon ridiculous villains again because
Yeah, and that's what it is. It is literally a serial Saturday morning cartoon. It just happens to be really realistic looking. And of course, because of a few very meaningful moments in the original trilogy, we expect to sit down and have a religious experience instead of just have a fun movie made for kids.
hey everyone, so I'm cutting it off here. Next week we are going to continue our discussion on Attack of the Clones. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and remember, as always, make tomorrow better than yesterday.